Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here today. This is Paul Taubman with 9.Connects, and you are in the right place if you are here for our presentation on project templates in A365. Well, you also get a little bit of a bonus because in order to do project templates in A365, you generally have to know how to do templates, period, in A365. So I'll be covering that just as much as we talk about project templates in A365. So with that being said, just a quick housekeeping note. I'm going to probably run for most of this presentation today, but feel free to ask questions. There's a questions panel in the GoToWebinar panel there. Behind the scenes for me today, I've got both my colleagues Eric and Tom Cassidy, who may be able to answer some of those questions. I may have a little bit of time afterwards to answer some. If we don't, obviously we'll take those offline and we can discuss them with you. Also behind the scenes is Christopher Che, who will probably be moderating, well, he'll be moderating the polling questions and also some of the questions if there's some that need my attention thereafter. So with that being said, let's jump on into a polling question here just to make sure you guys are live and kicking. So for A365, what is your level of comfort? And so the reason I'm asking this is because some of you may say like, yeah, you know what, I know how to roll with the punches. Others feel like it's like a landmine, probably a minefield. So just give me, I just want to see what my audience, how my audience feels with it today. So we'll open that polling question here. So, okay, at least about, 13% of you are very familiar with it, okay? For those who are very familiar with it, hopefully I'm gonna show you a couple little tricks and tips, and you know that there's more than one way to do things in there. A good portion of you can get around it, but obviously there's a comfort level that's missing. Hopefully by the time I show you this thing, you'll feel a little more comfortable with it, and then you're not familiar with it, learning about it. So it's a good percentage here today about it. For those who are learning about this, this is just one aspect of what we'll call configuration management. And so, yes, the templates are a very important element of it, but to also make sure that you involve yourself into the things like the lifecycle management and the revision control things. All these things really need to be set up before you can really make this work. Okay, I do have one other polling question for you. So this is your general level of comfort. I'm just wondering if you've had any experience creating templates in A365. So we'll open that polling question up now. Okay, we can close this out. So a couple of you are doing it all the time, which is good. So again, hopefully I'm going to show you a couple of tips and tricks that might make your life a little bit easier on this. Many of you have done so as needed. I get that because a lot of times a template is kind of a one and done type of thing, and every so often you might have to go in there to update it. But for the most part, once you've got it, you've got it. And those who haven't tried it yet, hang on, you're in for an interesting webinar here today. So with that, let me talk about my objectives for a few minutes. Number one, understand Altium's treatment of template types. And the reason I had to say this is because we're talking about templates, but there's so many different angles of approach for templates when it comes to Altium Designer. So the term template is really ambiguous, and I want to kind of separate it into what I'll call three categories or types that I've kind of come up with. Some of them Altium's come up with, some of my own naming conventions, just to kind of keep this webinar somewhat sane. The second part is a method to upload the project template. So I'm going to show you guys how to take a project template and upload it into A365. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you methods to correct or add templates. So when you bring up a project template, that's kind of half the story because there are other templates that support your projects. And so those have to be brought up separately because everything has to be properly under their own categories for revision control. And so I'll show you how to either add them and or correct them. Okay. So let's talk about templates for a few minutes. By the way, just give me a couple of minutes within the PowerPoint presentation, then we'll get into Altium Designer, but just want to make sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to templates, okay? So even though they define them as a template, there are different applications. So what I've done was I was thinking about, well, what makes this one different from another? So what's the difference between an SCHDOT versus an out job, right? They all act as templates, but they act in different functions. So what I ultimately realized was that you could break them down in three categories. There are what they call overlays. There are what I call stencils. So don't look for Altium stencils in Altium's literature. They do not use that term. It's a term I came up with to kind of move it away from the idea of it just being an overlay. And then there are actual editors. Now, normally we don't use editors, and I'll talk about this in a moment, but we're dealing with a project template. So in a project template, we want to start off with schematics and a layout, a PCB doc basically. Well, if that's the case, we're starting off actually with editors being in our templates, which is generally unusual, but it is a template in that particular realm. So let's look at these a little closer. So an overlay, just for people's general knowledge, is a template that is placed over the sheet. So an SCH.dot file is an example of that. There is no editing of the graphics. So once you place it on the sheet, you cannot move the graphics around. You can change the parameters, but those are normally changed in either the document itself or in the project level parameters. Okay, so that's the only thing that you can change there. And then changes to the original overlay requires an update to any copies used in the project. So if I don't like something in the title block, or there's something that needs to be added to the title block, which is usually in a, for example, a schematic SCH.dot file, I have to actually go to that SCH.dot file, make the change, and then push it over. Okay, so and as you know, this is kind of a common theme in Altium. Altium does not dynamically change things. It usually requires you to load something, or to, if it's there and it recognizes that you made a change, you have to approve of it. Okay, and here's an example of an overlay, pretty common type of thing. So if you create an SCH.dot file, you're going to change the size. You'll probably change possibly the zoning. You'll add in a title bar, block here at the bottom, possibly a revision block on the top. And the same thing true is for the draftsman. There's what's called the DWS.dot file. Now, some of you may have attended last month's webinar on Draftsman, or just familiar with Draftsman, and said, wait a minute, there's two DOT files for Draftsman, and that is true. But the other one I don't consider to be an overlay. That goes into the next topic of what I call stencils. So what is a stencil? Well, it's really a template that's either used to produce a document, okay, and you'll see an example of that in a moment, or to load information into the editor. Okay, that's the idea of what I'm calling a stencil. And there's quite a few things that we use in Altium. You may not even realize it, but we have quite a few what I'll call stencils in Altium. And by the way, once we've applied the stencil, the information can be modified. And not just, and when I say information, I'm talking about the graphics. So that's kind of the major difference between this and the overlays. The overlays, I can't change the graphics. Here, whatever I bring into the editor, I can stomp over and modify and change to my heart's delight. So what does this list look like? Here it is right here. So for examples, we have the draftsman, because the DWF.dot file, well, what do we do with that file? What we do is we set up, well, I want a bill of materials over here, and I want some images of the board over here. And on this page, I want the drill table. So you put those things out there, and then once you open it up, Altium fills in the blanks. And then later on, it's, if you don't like where it's at, or it's too big, you can modify its properties to your heart's delight. Same thing with the stack-up file, the rule file, the mechanical layers, even the PRJ PCB itself. When you create a project template, it starts off with a handful of schematics and a PCB doc, but you can add and change things to your heart's delight. And even the BOM XLTX file for Excel formatting, right? So people will set up this .xltx file so that it will, the data will format itself in such a way that it will work better for their systems. Right, so that's what I'm considering to be a stencil. Now, just as a side note, not all of these things Altium can take in as a quote unquote true template. So Draftsman, they've got a directory for this. They have a directory for stack-ups. They have a directory for the project PRJ PCB, which will be in, and they even have one for the XLTX. They don't seem to have one for stack. They have it for stack-up too. They do not have one for the rules of the mechanical layers. So just note that you may still have to have some common directory on your network that would maintain a rule file or a mechanical layers file. I know they recently came up with one for the constraints, but that's a little bit different than the RUL file that you can save off and then re-enter into a PCB doc. So just be aware that not every single one of these things has a storage location in A365, okay? And then lastly, the editors. So under normal circumstances, editors are not templates. So what are the editors? Well, pardon me, before I get into that, just one other thing. In a project template, the following editors can be used as a part of the template. And these are the ones. Now you may say outjobs. So I was hemming and hawing about the outjob file, because the outjob file is one of those things that you can either leave in the project template, or you can manage it through Altium 365. So Altium 365 does consider the outjob to be a template, but really when you look at it, it's actually an editor. So that's why it was a little bit of a hard call to say, does this really fall into the stencil department, or does it fall into the editor department? I've decided to call it an editor. But that is one decision you'll have to make. Do you just leave the outjob files in your project template and let the designers change those accordingly? or are you trying to do a formal release through A365, which the project releaser would probably want to have access to your out job files at that point, and you may want to set these up very specifically for your company needs. So I have to kind of leave that one in your hands as to which one you want to, how you want to use it. Okay. So now that I've kind of gone through this, I'm going to start walking through the plan for us bringing up a project into A365. So the first thing, set up the project outside of A365. And this is true with a lot of the stuff that you want to do in Altium, is that if there's something you're trying to set up and then bring it into Altium, like libraries or templates, set them up outside so you don't start the, let's say, start the counter at that point, because once you bring in A365, it's under revision control, and now there's going to be, every time you change it, you're going to bump a revision, and in a sense, you're also going to add more clutter. So if I start trying to do this project in Altium 365 and I make 20 updates to it, well, then I'm just creating a lot of clutter. And yeah, I can delete those, but it's just better to start it outside so you're not having to deal with formatting issues or other hassles associated with basically data management within A365. The second part of that, once you've got it up here, you want to create a placeholder in A365 for the project template. So I'll show you how to create a placeholder. This is different from just saying file, basically file create. Because by default, when you create something in 365 or declare it, it's going to say, okay, well, here's the editor, create it, and then save it. But I don't want to do that. I actually want to take what I already have and bring it into Altium Designer, but I got to put a placeholder in there first to make that happen. I'll show you how to do that. It's one little switch that you need to hit. Okay, then we're going to upload the project, which is pretty straightforward to some degree, though there's caveats to that. And then we need to remove anything that does not belong, because one of the things that happens is that a lot of times when we set up our projects, we tend to leave templates in there, because in order for us to use the project parameters, those templates have to be a part of the project so we can see the relationship of the project parameters between the PRJ PCB and the actual template. But a lot of times we leave things in here that we don't want because we don't want the designers mucking with them. So we'll talk about that. And then upload, overlay, and stencil templates at that point, because when we bring this project in, Altium's just literally taking whatever you've got, and that's it. And if it was pointing to a local directory for a template, we've got to tell it, no, don't point to that local directory anymore. You've got to point to the one that's in A365. So we have to do that as well. And then link project documents to the documents of the project template. So we're going to go through all the motions of this here right now. Okay. I do have a quick polling question for you. Do you already have a project template? I'm just kind of curious to see if you guys are just seeing how this whole thing gets put together, or if you've got one and say, yeah, I'm ready to get this into A365. They're good. Okay, we're going to close the poll here. So a lot of you do have one. But it's not in A365, so that's probably why you're here, and I'm going to show you how this is going to work, so hang in there. And then yes, in 365, so hopefully you'll pick up some information on how to enhance what you've already got in there. A good portion of you do not have a project template, so let me throw something up onto the screen here very quickly for those who do not have a project template, so you have something to work with. On our site at 9.connects, video-project-template-set, we'll put this over here. I think we can put this in the link on your GoToWebinar panel. If you go over here, you'll see pretty much the exact same project I'm going to show today. We just recently updated it. I do have to clean up some of these things over here because we made some modifications to it, but generally speaking, what you see in here is pretty much what the verbiage is talking about over here. So at the very bottom of this thing, because I try to give some details about what you've got over here, and you can download this template set, and this again pretty much can be the same one that I've got. Okay, so we just have to bump the revision on this, but it's there. I wouldn't try to do it while I'm doing the presentation here because I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff. So I would just want to let you know there is a project template for you to start with if you don't know how to start it. With that being said, I'm going to bail out of my presentation for the time being. Let's get into Altium. So I am going to close this. I was looking at something just before the webinar. We don't need to have that up, but what we've got over here will work for the moment. And as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, let me pull the Explorer panel down because I just want to focus in on the project template. So here's an example of a project template. And as I mentioned before, there's the primary reason why we would have all of these templates in here is so that I can see the project parameters. And where are the project parameters? I'm going to go under PRJ PCB. So there's two ways to do it. I can go to project options, or I can right click on PRJ PCB here, and I can say that I'm going to go to the project options here. And then I would go into my parameters and I can see all of my parameters. And we've talked about this in other webinars before. Just a very quick recap. All of your parameters should be here in one location. If Altium will allow you to create document parameters, but then you have to go to each one of those documents and make those updates. And that takes a lot of work. So if you set this up accordingly, then you have one place that you go for all of your parameters. In terms of names, we're very strategic about the names. We want to have prefixes that make sense. So if it's universal, we have the word block in front of it. Specific to draftsman, we've got the word, you can put draftsman or DRFT as we did here. Or if you have schematic sheets, SCH. On the value side, everything we do, we try to not only use the same name for the parameter, so we know which, so if we see something like, well, where did that come from? We have a way of tracing it back to the name. But more importantly, all of them have brackets on them so that we have a hint or know that, hey, we haven't filled this in yet. So I need to go back to the PRJ PCB parameters tab or project options tab here and under parameters, and I've got to update that. So that's really important. But that also causes a little bit of an issue here. And that issue is that because I'm using these project parameters, I have to have each one of my templates in here while I'm working on them. All right, so let's take, for example, let's bring up my my main page SCH.dot file. So and the reason I'm bringing this up here, so you can see down at the bottom, everything is in the blocks, or pardon me, the square brackets, which indicates to me that yes, my template is seeing my project parameters. And if I pull this out and I make this a free doc, which this will become in the project in the A365 templates, then it's going to look like this. And I know that I've got it it's not seeing the project stuff because it's no longer a part of the project. So just keep this in mind that yes, when we store this, we don't want these in here, but when we need to work on these, or we need to primarily work on them, we actually have to reintroduce them back into the project temporarily. And I'll go through the motions of that, but just keep that in mind. So when you do get a project and you see these basically templates in there, the first thing you want to do when we're going to get it into Altium 365 is we want to remove these templates. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one of these, and so it should be pretty easy because most of these are .dwf.dot files. So I'm going to remove them. So I'm just going to pull these all out, and as I drag them over here, they become free docs, and that's fine for now. Okay, let me check a few other things here. I'm going to leave my out job files as files within that. Again, I could pull these out and then link them back later, but I'm not going to do that for this one. There's another one over here. I'll also pull out the template here because Altium can treat that as a separate template. And then there are the library documents. So for ours, because we had some things that we created and we put into our SCH.dot and we pushed over to the PCB doc, there are some library files in here. Get them out. Absolutely get them out. And because if you leave these in here and someone uses this template, okay, now what they're going to do is they have a possibility of creating local, they basically have the ability to create local libraries. Now, you can leave them in there, but also get out your wallet. Now, what do I mean by that? Because if you do that and someone starts creating stuff that is local, okay, you're going to get into what's called the contractor's loop. And just as a quick recap of the contractor's loop, this is when somebody builds something outside of your libraries, they put them into the document. Later on, they into their schematics and they use the footprints in the PCB. So now they've got a local library. And later on, they'll take those parts and say, hey, we got to get these into the A365 library. Well, that's great. But in order to maintain conformity to the library standards, the librarian, whoever's going to put them up there, has to change the look of it, because most of the time they don't follow the procedure that's in A365, right? So they say, okay, well, let's say this resistor, this resistor is, horizontal 400 mils, but really the default was vertical 300 mils. So all these things have to get changed. Once they get changed or added to the library, now you've actually got to go individually through your design to update each one, because if you just blindly, and you can do this in Altium, you can just blindly update everything and everything's going to be broken. And so a lot of customers come to us afterwards saying, hey, can you clean up our documents? And that's why I say you have to take out your wallet, because it's a time staking effort to do that. And I want you to avoid that to begin with. Okay, so yes, we created these library parts in here to help along with this this particular project template. If you're going to use it, that's great, but please pull these things out if you're going to release this to your designers, especially if it's going to go into A365. And as for what's in these, we can click on this here for a moment and take a look at them. Okay, I bring this up over here. You can take, if you're going to use these, feel free to bring them and introduce them into your own A365 library. And some of these do have footprints and some of them don't, but that would be the plan for this. But don't just blindly leave this in here, because you're leaving yourself for a terrible opportunity for the contractors loop, and I don't want that to happen to you. So in this case here, I am going to definitely drag these out. I do not want them in here. Now, there is one other thing I'm going to do as well, is I'm going to actually reintroduce one of these back in. Let me do this one here just because it'll be easier for my eyes to grab onto. I'm going to bring it back in because I want to show you what happens if we accidentally leave one in after we have uploaded this into A365. But for what I've got over here, I'm going to close this one out, and I'm going to save this. And so we're ready to go. So I'm going to say, yeah, this is ready to go. I'm happy with what I've got here. This is what I want to put into A365 here. So I am going to bring up my Explorer panel, and I already had it up here, but if you need to, you can go into your panels and you can go into Explorer, make sure that's up here. And if you're following Altium's system already, then you're going to see manage content, and then you're going to see these various template directories that Altium has created. So Altium has like pretty much a directory for every single file type out there, except for the ones I mentioned earlier on. But you can see there's one here for project templates. Okay. If you need to create one, just very quickly, right-click on where it says, well, in this case, templates. You'll say add subfolder. It doesn't matter which one of these you're going to click on, because in the end, you're going to get the same prompt anyway. Give it the folder name, and then go down the file type and find whichever template you're going to create. Now, just as a side note, there's project catalog and there's project templates. Make sure you use project templates, because if you use project catalog, you're actually saying, no, I want to create a directory for my projects. Okay, and then you fill out this accordingly. You can use the content type, which I think is a PRJT. That's when they say $ content type code. That's the one Altium predefines automatically. So if you did that, that's fine. So you can assign it accordingly. I'm not going to create a new one because I already have one here. But if we go into our projects templates here, you can see I've already have some that I've played with in the past. And what's neat about this, once you've got this up over here, you can see what's already been, or what's included in this project template, which is really neat. Okay, but I want to add mine in here now. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to say add template, and that's going to bring up our create new item here. And I will call this one 20. Actually, let's call this one project. I don't want to put a date on it this time. I was putting dates on it as I was practicing to know what I could delete, but since this is a webinar, we'll just call this one project template webinar, make it immortal here, not put a date stamp on it. And then for the description, obviously you'd want to have some good description here, but to keep this moving along, I'm just going to copy and paste the name and the description on it. Let's look at the advanced for a moment. You don't have to worry about the folder because we're already in the folder we want to be in. Also, you'll notice that there's some revision naming schemes. Now, if you are not using the Pro version, don't sweat it. You can still add templates to your A365. You just won't get the naming scheme here or the lifecycle scheme. Now, you can notice one thing. I'm just going to bring this up. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a little tangent. You get a little bonus here. I was playing with this thing that's called the ASME Y1435M scheme. It's in the revision schemes that they provide. There's a bunch of different schemes they provide. And this one really sticks out like a sore thumb. And I was like, well, what is this scheme? Well, investigating it, what it is, in short, for the purpose of revision control, it is an alpha scheme. So Rev B, Rev C, and so on and so forth. But in this particular standard, there are certain letters you cannot use because they look like numbers or they look remarkably similar to another letter. And so, for example, they don't allow the letter I or they don't allow the letter O. So if you use this scheme over here, you'll use a single letter revision, but let's say you are on Rev H, you're not going to go to I, you're going to immediately jump to Rev K. That's really what it's doing. So anyways, I am going to keep to the level 1 revision scheme, and the lifecycle definition here is a generic one that I'm going to use. Now, the big thing here is this little magic button. Turn this off, because I don't want it to open editing, because the intention is not to copy my stuff from open up another one, try to copy or duplicate what I did in one to the other. I actually want to use my files as the templates. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to press OK. And what's going to happen here is you'll see that a new line item has shown up. Now, if you're not using the Pro version, it will still show up. You just won't see the revision state. Okay. So if you're using the Pro version, you'll see it. If you're just using the default one, you're not going to see it. Okay. There it is. That's great, but I have no files in here. So now I've got to add the files in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to do an upload. Okay. And this is going to ask for some things. Always add something in here like initial release. Okay. That's just important because in the end, people are like, what's the difference? What happened over here? Why do they change it? Throw something in there, even if it's vague. Press add. And this is going to take us to, now this took me over here to my Altium designer. I'm going to quickly jump over here and I'm going to go into my, my webinar template over here. And let's see, what I want to add into here is the PRJ PCB. Now, if I just press open, the only thing I'm going to get is the PRJ PCB, which kind of is silly, okay? I think Altium should have been smart enough to say, well, you've got the PRJ PCB and the PRJ PCB knows all the files associated in it. Why don't you just pull that up and call it good? It doesn't work that way, as I've learned the hard way. So I have to hold down my, I need to hold down my control key and pull in all the ones I need. So let's see, I want this one and this one. Sorry guys, bear with me for a moment here. I'm gonna click on this, not gonna take the DOTs in, I'm gonna take in the schematic ones. I am actually gonna leave the back page off just to show you what happens if I missed one, okay? So if you miss one, it's not the end of the world, okay? I'm also gonna pull in one here as well, just in case, just to show what happens with it. Let's see, I'm gonna pull this one and this one here. I'll even pull the bomb doc in there as well. So I've got an interesting collection of things. I think this is the best of my ability. Again, I've purposely added in things I shouldn't pull in, things that I forgot to pull in, and we can work through those. So I'm gonna press open, and now I'm gonna say okay. And now Altium's going to add this in as revision 1. Okay, and that's what's nice about this. When I click on this now, give it a moment here to update. And voila, so there it is. So now I've got it. Now I've got a good start, but if I was hand this off to designers, they would be pulling their hair out. So there's a few things we got to fix. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go to edit, and it's going to bring it up. And you can already see now it's not happy about a couple of things, like if, hey, I forgot the SCHDOT here, and it's saying, why did you throw this in here? It was not a part of this project, which is good. Okay, so it's indicating there's a bit of a miss. Not a problem. So I'm going to bring back my projects panel here. Now at this time, this one over, you'll notice there's a difference, but they look exactly the same, but there is a slight difference. You can see up here, it says 9.connect LLC. That is our A365 server. You can see it's indented here, and this was the name that I gave it. Down here, you can see that it's a .dsn work, so this one's local. At this point, I really don't need the local, so I'm going to close this one out. So let's go over here, and actually, yeah, I'm sorry, I got to go over here, PRJ PCB, and then I can close the project. Okay, I will actually leave these up over here. You'll see why, because it actually helps me when I need to name something later on when I introduce the schematic overlay template in, all right? So what do I got over here? I've got some things that are missing, so I can see that over here, and I've got a thing here that doesn't know anything about, okay? So that looks pretty good. Let's bring out this. So everything else is okay, but I've got to fix this. So how do I fix this over here? Well, the way I would fix this is, what I don't want to do is I don't want to go back, and I'll bring it up over here. I have it on my screen. So here is where the original project resides. If I simply take what I've got over here and drag it over here, I'm going to get a redirect arrow, and I don't want that. I want this project to be cohesive. So what I'm going to do, but I'm going to take this down here for a moment, is I am going to go here and I'm going to say right click. I'm going to say add existing to project. But notice where it puts me. It puts me in the cache. Okay, so the temporary cache that Altium creates. So a quick reminder to all those new to A365. It may look like we're working in A365. We are not working in A365. We store stuff in A365. But Altium actually, a lot of times when you pull something down for editing, it's hiding it 99% of the time. It is doing it over here somewhere on your hard drive. Okay, so this is where it's at. And what I need to do here at this time is I need to add in that file that I was missing. So let me bring that other, let's bring this one up over here. So I'm gonna go over to, I think this was the back page. I'm gonna drag this in. There it is. I'm gonna, now it's already selected. I'm gonna press open. And it's gonna ask me, do I wanna replace? The answer is yes, because again, it's just asking me to change the link from the local link to the one that's now in this new directory. I'm going to say yes to it, and you will see that this now gets turned on. Okay. Now, what about ones like this where like I did add it in, but I don't really want it here, or it's missing, and I don't, like, good riddance to it. I don't want it out. So what you can do on this, you can right click and you can say remove file from project, or if you know there's multiple ones you want to get rid of, you can say remove all missing files. It's going to ask you, do you want to remove this? I'm going to say yes, and now it's gone. Okay. So now at this point, I pretty much have what I was looking for. I've got all the files that I want in here, and this is good. Now, if I want to save this, I wouldn't recommend saving the server, because every time I save the server, I'm bumping the rev. But if I want to make sure I'm saving because I'm done for tonight and want to go home, and I want this up here tomorrow morning when I open Altium, right click and say save. This will save it again to that local directory I just showed you in the Explorer panel. Okay, so that's fine. What else do we need to do? Well, let's take a look at something here. For example, let's go into the lead sheet SEH.dot file. Okay, and what you're going to notice here, I'm going to click somewhere around here and go into, I already have my properties up. You'll notice I'm in document options, and towards the bottom of document options, we have our template. Watch where my cursor, watch what gets highlighted when I click on this. When I click on it, what's highlighted? At the very bottom under local is my main page. So this thing is still pointing to the local directory. It is not pointing to anything in A365, and quite frankly, I have nothing in A365 to point it to. So now we want to address that issue. So I'm going to bring back my Explorer panel over here, and this time we're going to go into SCH templates. Right? We bring this up over here. Let's add a template. We're going to do the exact same thing we did before. Okay, we're going to put the information in. We're not going to open for editing. We're going to basically upload our document that we have in our local drive. Now the name, that's why I kept these over here so I could get the name properly. I still think I probably, okay, it's schematic title block. I think I closed the other one, so I don't have the full name, but I remember what it is. So let's say schematic title block, and this was main page. And again, you can give it whatever name you want. And I certainly don't need to put SEH.dot over here. And again, for time savings, I'm just gonna put this here. Though, if you really were gonna do this, I would recommend that you said, you know, if there's a zoning type you're using, if it's the full-on, you know, title bar that you've got, if there's a revision block in this thing, I think you'd probably want to add a couple of those things in there. But again, for time, I'm just going to put the name as the description. Under the advanced, again, pretty much you're going to change this to a level 1 revision scheme, and I'm going to use a generic life cycle. And again, turning off the open for editing after creation, and I'm going to press OK. So this should add that in there. You can see this here. And so we're good. And I'm going to right click now. I'm going to say upload. This should again, oh, got initial release. So again, always don't leave these things blank. Press add. This should take me back to where I was before. And what's cool about this is it filtered it out for me so I can find it very easily, because it remembered what I did last time. That's why it brought me to the same directory. And the filter over here took all the other things that were in there and removed them so I could just see the SEH.dot file. Press open, press OK, and this should be in there now once this pushes up. Okay, I'm going to click on this. We get a preview of it once it's done doing its updating here. And there it is. Cool. So, oh, sorry, there this one is. And there it is. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way here again, and let's go back into our SEH.dot file. So one thing I'd recommend you do is that if you had to do what I just did, where you have to introduce the template, close this out, or save it first if you had to. So if there's any changes, hit save, but close this first. And the reason is that otherwise, sometimes the template doesn't always update it and you won't find it in the list. I'm going to bring this back up here again. And then now I'm going to click on, again, make sure that you're in properties document options here. Go down to the template, and if you do the drop down, again, it's still pointing to the local, but now I can see my template here. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say yes, just this document, okay, and voila. And you saw nothing changed here because it's the exact same thing, right? But there it is. This one now is associated. You can see it right over here. It says version 1, okay? And that's the idea that you would use to slowly but steadily introduce all of your templates into it. Unfortunately, you can only do it one at a time because each one has to be uploaded separately and declared accordingly as a separate document. So it's a little tedious, but once you got it done, at least it'll all be up there at that time. Now, one of the scenario that's probably going to happen to you at some point or another, let's say later on, you have a staff meeting saying like, you know what, we got to change the company block. There's some information we got to add to it, somehow modify this. So how do we go about doing that? Well, I will do it to this one that we just added up. So So remember, the first thing we did was just simply added this in, and we relinked this document here, right? In fact, I'll save this. Okay. Now, what if I have to make a change to this one over here, like an actual physical change to it? I'm going to right click and I'm going to edit it. Brings it up. I'm going to pull this away again for a moment. And you'll notice at the very top, what does it do? It puts it under the 9.connects LLC A365 account. It is not a part of the project because I never brought it in as a part of the project. But I need to see my parameters. I want to understand what these parameters are. Now, I don't have to if I'm just doing some graphical stuff. But if I wanted to make sure the parameter stuff, or I'm going to add parameters there, then I want to drag it into the project. Okay, and you'll see now at the top, there's a little arrow, a redirect arrow. And yes, now Altium recognizes this as part of the project, and it also sees all of the project parameters. That's how I know that it's recognizing it. Here, I can make whatever changes I want to make. So if I'm saying like, look, this logo, I want to, they asked me to do something. I'm just putting a scenario out over here. Let's say they said, well, you know what, we want the logo at the top right instead. So let's do this. If I can do some quick editing here. So let's do a Control X and let's delete that. Well, actually, I'll put that on top of that. That was the overlay for it. Okay, and so let's say, okay, the logo's up there now, and now I'm going to save it. So there's two things I'd recommend you do first. First off, drag it out of the project so that there's no association to the project. Okay, so once I dragged it out, you'll see the little redirect arrow has been removed from it. And now I'm going to do, you can certainly do a save locally, but that just again saves it locally to the working area in your local drive. I want to save to server. So I'm going to do save to server over here, and I'm going to say added logo to the top left corner. I don't know why I'm titling this, but that's okay. The advanced, there's not much you can do here because it's already under revision control. I'm going to press OK. And now this is going to disappear, but now I've got the new version of it. As I mentioned earlier, if you make any changes of this nature, this thing did not change, right? It got, this over here is not going to change until I go back into the template over here and I do a refresh on it. And I'll say just this document, and now it should move it. And there it is, probably in a bad place, but at least you get the idea for where I'm going with this, okay? So that's how you would work each one of these documents. Unfortunately, you have to do this for each one of your SCHDOT files, at each one of your draftsman ones as well. It's just a bit of a labor of love, but once you've got this and you've got it dialed in, you're going to find it to be extremely useful. So that the time investment is going to certainly pay off on it. Let's see. There's one other thing I was going to bring up for you before we jump over here and just talk a little bit more about 9.connects, and it's this here. So you may ask yourself a question about, hey, in the preferences under data management, you see something called templates, okay? One of the things you're going to find about this, as I have learned, if you really are going to work with templates locally, then just make sure Altium knows where the local file is, okay? And once you've got that set up, whatever you do in your Explorer panel, you do in Altium Designer, as long as it ends up over here, and you can just copy and paste, you don't even have to use this over here. I would look at this more as a viewing to show what Altium recognizes as either local and or server templates. I would not try to do the ads over here, because in the end, it's going to bring up the exact same thing anyways that you see in the Explorer panel. And I just find that you have a lot more visibility. Hold on, because I can't bring up the Explorer panel because this is a dialog box and not a panel. But that's what you can look at things for here to see where it's at. But I wouldn't necessarily use this to add things in it. So I just want to bring that to your attention. You can easily do this again. In summary, if you're going to do things locally, just make sure this is set up, and then literally put things in that directory as you create them. Or if you're going to use Altium 365, do it through the Explorer panel, and you'll get the same effect. So I just want to bring that to your attention there. Okay, so that's what I've got over here for this presentation. I'd like to go back over to my PowerPoint slides because I do have a question for you. Let's go from the current slide. And so actually I believe there's another question here, and I got them out of order. So now that you've seen the project in template A365, I'm curious, what's your next step? Are you gonna put it in 365? You already got in 365. Now I was just looking at it. So if you can take a moment for that polling question, I'd appreciate it. Okay, interesting spread. Okay, so there's a small percent of you already have one up there and it's good to go. I'm glad to hear that. And I hope that after what you saw here today, you're like, yeah, I've already done that. And you're not in any panic saying, oh, shoot, I missed that. And for the rest of you over there, if you're leaving it outside of A365, I completely understand that. And then for those who are going to create or upload to A365, hopefully this instruction makes sense. We'll obviously post this so that you can see it. Those who are going to create the project template, again, feel free to use what we have provided on our website if you need to start for it. And again, change it to your heart's content. It was really just there to give you some guidance. And for the percentage that aren't going to really do anything with it, hopefully it gives you still an idea of the power of A365 when it comes to templates. So with that, one other question here I believe I've got, what do you think of the webinar? So pull that question up here. All right, so I'm glad someone realized that they didn't lose their entire hour here, but for the 9% who had good content but not applicable to my job function, I think it's still, the fact is that if you are using 365 or your company's using it, you now have a really good insight into how templates operate. So I'm glad you did attend and hopefully you did get some good useful information out of it. Most of you did find some useful information from that. And again, if you've already been playing with this here, it's just a matter of saying, okay, can I make these somehow better? And of course, those who did learn a lot from it, appreciate that. And I hope you're able to apply it. So with that being said, let me talk about 9.connects for a moment. You are here for a reason. Number one, to learn or refresh yourself on A365 templates, to learn if there are features that would be of some use to you. And again, I hope there are some things, if you walked away with one or two things like, yeah, I've got to try that, or yeah, that's pretty cool, I'm going to add that to my templates, then I feel good that you've gotten something out of this. And then lastly, to see if new features have been added since you've last spent time in it. And Altium is constantly improving the features little by little over time. It's never, it's like it's sometimes they're pretty instant, but a lot of times like, oh yeah, they added that in. You didn't even know they added it in. So what are the services we provide here at 9.connects? PCB design, layout services. We always say this, we like the ugly stuff, the DDR, high speed, flex. And again, I'll always repeat this. Look, if you don't know how you're going to approach this, come talk to us. Even if you plan on doing it yourself, you're going to go to somebody else, that's fine. We want you to be successful. We want to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure because we've done these things. So let us know if we can be of service or you just need a sympathetic ear. We'll be more than happy to talk to you. Training. So we do three things. We do our PCB foundations class, which we call, our PCB foundations class, an introductory of the process, the design process for printed circuit boards. We even have a textbook that we've recently released that goes along with it. Altium Designer Full Spectrum Training. This is learning Altium, and it really has a great pace. It's enough for the newbies to figure out what's going on, but it's also a really great refresher for those who have quite a bit of experience in Altium. As you know, with Altium, there's always numerous ways of doing things. You usually beat a path that just gets you to where you need to go. And sometimes it's nice to explore these other paths that might actually be more efficient to you. And of course, we do A365 training as well. And I'd like to talk to you about that here for just a moment. There's library restoration, creation, library and services. A lot of that also has to play into A365 as well. And let me talk about A365 here. So when people come to us saying like, get us going, there's a lot of elements to it. Number one, there's a library restoration, because if we take a crappy library, one that's really not in its proper form, and we put it into A365, all you're doing is preserving that state of the library, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So a lot of times it starts off with, hey, what do we need to do to get your library in such a way that when we migrate it into 365, that it is prim and proper. Second one that we spend a lot of time is configuration management, because what you're going to learn, things like getting your libraries, getting your your life cycle states, getting your revisions, those type of things. Once you've established those and you get things moving, it's really hard to change a lot of those things because you already have documents that are using the configuration management you started with. So it's not one of those things you really can change midstream. You can do it for the new files, but the old files are going to maintain the old configuration management. There's always a lot of team discussion and efforts here. This is not one of those 3-day trainings. We thought about making a 3-day training of this. It's fruitless to do it for two reasons. Number one, you'll get overwhelmed. And number two, you have to have buy-in from the team, because even if you did get it all and you set it up all yourself, say, wow, look at this great job I did, there are going to be people who are already not going to want to use it. And if it's not set up to their desire, then they're not going to use it at all. They're going to fight you. So the idea is to always have team effort, discussion, buy-in so that everybody says, yeah, this is going to be great. I want to use this thing. And then of course you always do the training, because in the end you want to make sure that whoever's going to take this over, they know what they're doing on the administrative side, and the designers know how to use it, so that they don't just say to hell with it and then they just go off and do designs on their own without A365. And trust me, it happens. So that's what we provide over here, and that's the presentation part of our webinar. I'd like to take